My breast cancer was found on a lovely fall afternoon. The kids were away and I was having a little time in bed with my husband. And it went from very romantic to very unromantic when we both felt something that we knew shouldn't be there. Well, I had had a mammogram and it was clear. And I knew I should get a mammogram every year. That was about what I knew. I had had a baseline. And then I knew that I needed to follow up on it. So I got another mammogram and was told, wait 6 months, this will be fine. It just didn't feel right to me. And of course, it was the time before the internet, so I threw myself into researching how you detect breast cancer or no breast cancer, although I was pretty convinced I had breast cancer. So I sought out test after test, several, and kept being told, you're fine, this is nothing. But I just knew and finally got a diagnosis of breast cancer. Making the decision about surgery treatment for breast cancer is complicated. And I always now recommend women get a second opinion. That's maybe because I got 5 opinions. And of course, by the 4th, maybe by the 3rd opinion, doctors were saying to me, Mo, you really know what you need to do. But I was just so surprised that a staunch feminist like myself cared so much about keeping my breast when it became clear with every appointment that probably a mastectomy was what was needed. I found a surgeon and he was just awful. He was very smart, but in my opinion, and as far as our personalities not meshing, he was just awful. He said something to me at one of our meetings. He leaned over and put his hand on my knee without permission and said, you'll feel so much better, dear, when that breast is off. And of course, I had been fighting and fighting and fighting for just the opposite. So I fired him. I fired him for that reason and because he told my husband not to tell me what he found when he did the biopsy. And my husband and I had agreed that we would be open and honest with each other. And when I awoke and he had been told, Michael had been told by the doc not to tell me because I would be too upset, I saw what I say now was the first lion look on my husband's face. He had never lied to me before. And pretty quickly I broke that down and found out that indeed I did have breast cancer and proceeded to find another surgeon. And as I saw surgeon after surgeon, this was when they were telling me, you know what you have to do. I finally found one that came highly recommended. He was a skilled doc, highly regarded, and because he made me feel part of the team. Not as if he was doing something to me, but as if we were a team working together toward my health. Looking back, it was so difficult for me to come to the decision about the mastectomy. And there was, at that time, this was over 25 years ago, a lot of trouble in the news about implants, not necessarily for breast cancer treatment or post-breast cancer, but women who had had breast reductions or breast enlargements, and implants were wreaking all kinds of havoc. So that didn't sound very good to me. And I began to learn about surgeries like tram flap, where a piece of my own tissue would make me a breast. It sounded awful. And in the midst of all of this, My sister, 10 years younger, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and there was just too much. I didn't want any more surgery. I wanted to pay attention to my sister. I read a little tiny paragraph somewhere or a little tiny sentence somewhere that said, you can decide later. And I thought, oh, that's great. I'll decide later. And here I am in my high 60s thinking I still might decide for that reconstruction later. Most of the time I use a breast form, and it approximates the look of a breast. Probably most people have no idea. It's heavy and it gets hot and sweaty, and it's not perfect, but it does the job. And lots of times I don't even bother to wear it. I almost always wear it in a professional setting. In fact, I remember one day going to the executive floor where I worked at Carmanis Cancer Institute, and I was running late and I had some important people to talk to, and I was doing this, do I have everything with me? And I felt here and realized, oh my God, I don't have my right breast. And I attacked all of the secretaries on the floor, asking them for a bag, a sock, a pair of pantyhose, not really explaining why. And I thought, well, they're in a cancer center. They'll just understand. And finally someone, I was so scary to them, I'm sure, took her sandwich out of her lunchbox and put some napkins, and it made a breast, made a fine breast. But yeah, prosthesis is what I do most of the time, except when I'm swimming or just being relaxed at home, or with my sister, who always sometimes wears a prosthesis and sometimes doesn't. And that's how the world has to take me, as I am. I have had genetic testing, and apparently our cancer is not of the familial inherited kind, which most cancers are not. But there was enough cancer in our family that pushed me to genetic testing. I always say, whether it was inherited cancer or not, we're in the human family, and it's said that 1 of every 2 males and 1 of every 3 females will get cancer at some time in her life. So it doesn't seem so shocking anymore. Now, years later, when I've come to know literally hundreds, if not thousands, of other survivors. You know, ironically, I do have advice for doctors. And I say ironically because I was privileged to have the finest doctors. They treated me so well. They made me a part of the team. I learned so much from them, but they were also open to learning from me, and they listened to me, and we made decisions carefully and jointly. So my advice to docs is to listen to your patients. Maybe some patients want to hear, if you were my wife, if you were my daughter, but some of us don't want to hear that. We're on our own, and we really need information. We need you to figure out, doctor, what it is we need, how much information. My advice for women and men, because of course they can get breast cancer too, is know your own body, pay attention to it, stand up for yourself, get second opinions. I don't think you have to get 5, but get second opinions, learn about it. And I know that many of us have a limit on the tolerance for what we want to learn. Others of us want to know every single bit. And my surgeon said to me at one point, when I was very frightened and frustrated about not knowing enough, and I couldn't go to the internet, of course, he said, there is nothing about this disease that you need to know that you cannot know by asking questions and reading. And I immediately felt so relieved to hear that he had the faith in me that I could understand my disease in order to make decisions. And I tell that to others too, because they can. Ask again if you need to understand. Read more, but you can understand, you can be a part of that decision.